little chilly. Good enough. All right. Let's see what we're there. In such a time as this, it is not meet that every nice offence should bear its comment. Shakespeare. The cliffs threw their dark shadows wide on the waters, and the gloom of the evening had so far advanced as to conceal the discontent that brooded over the ordinarily open brow of Barnstable as he sprang from the rocks into the boat, and took his seat by the side of the silent pilot. "Shove off!" cried the lieutenant, in tones that his men knew must be obeyed. A seaman's curse light on the folly that exposes planks and lives to such navigation, and all to burn some old timberman, or catch a Norway trader asleep. "Give away, men, give away!" Notwithstanding the heavy and dangerous surf that was beginning to tumble in upon the rocks in an alarming manner, the startled seamen succeeded in urging their light boat over the waves, and in a few seconds were without the point where danger was most to be apprehended. Barnstable had seemingly disregarded the breakers as they passed, but sat sternly eyeing the foam that rolled by them in successive surges, until the boat rose regularly on the long seas, when he turned his looks around the bay in quest of the barge. "Aye, Griffith has tired of rocking in his pillowed cradle," he muttered, "and will give us a pull to the frigate when we ought to be getting the schooner out of this hard-featured landscape. This is just such a place as one of your sighing lovers would doubt on. A little land, a little water, and a good deal of rock. Damn Long Tom, but I am more than half your mind that an island now then is all the terra firma that a seaman needs." I know I read that terribly, I'm sorry. "It's reason and philosophy, sir," returned the sedate coxswain, and what land there is should always be a soft mud or a sandy ooze, in order that an anchor might hold, and to make sounding sartin. I have lost many a deep sea, besides hands led by the dozens on rocky bottoms, but give me the roadstead where a lead comes up light and an anchor heavy. There's a boat pulling athwart our forefoot, Captain Barnstable. Shall I run her aboard, or give her a berth, sir?" "'Tis the barge!" cried the officer. "Ned has not deserted me, after all." A loud hail from the approaching boat confirmed this opinion, and in a few seconds the barge and whaleboat were again rolling by each other's side. Griffith was no longer reclining on the cushions of his seats, but spoke earnestly and with a slight tone of reproach in his manner. "Why have you wanted so many precious moments, when every minute threatens us with new dangers? I was obeying the signal, but I heard your oars, and pulled back to take out the pilot." "Have you been successful?" "There he is, and if he finds his way through the shoals, he will earn a right to his name. This bids fair to the night when a man will need a spyglass to find the moon. But when you hear what I have seen on those rascally cliffs, you will be more ready to excuse my delay, Mr. Griffith." "You have seen the true man, I trust, or we incur this hazard to an evil purpose. Aye, I've seen him that is a true man, and him that is not, replied Barnstable bitterly. You have the boy with you, Griffith? Ask him what his young eyes have seen. Shall I? Cried the young midshipman laughingly. Then I have seen a little clipper in disguise outsail an old man-o'-war's man in a hard chase, and I have seen a straggling rover in long tops as much like my cousin. Peace, gobbler! exclaimed Barnstable in a voice of thunder. Would you detain the boats with your silly nonsense at a time like this? Away into the barge, sir, and if you find him willing to hear, tell Mr. Griffith what your foolish conjectures amount to, at your leisure. The boy stepped lightly from the whaleboat to the barge, whither the pilot had already preceded him, and as he sunk with a mortified air by the side of Griffith, he said in a low voice, "And that won't be long, I know, if Mr. Griffith thinks and feels on the coast of England, and he thought and felt at home." A silent pressure of his hand was the only reply that the young lieutenant made, before he paid the parting compliments to Barnstable and directed his men to pull for the ship. The boats were separating, and the plash of oars was already heard when the voice of the pilot was for the first time raised in earnest. "Hold!" he cried. "Hold water, I bid ye!" The men ceased their efforts at the commanding tones of his voice, and turning towards the whaleboat, he continued, "You will get your schooner under way immediately, Captain Barnstable, and sweep into the offing with as little delay as possible. Keep the ship well open from the northern headland as you pass us. Come within hail." "This is a clean chart and a plain sailing, Mr. Pilot," returned Barnstable. "But who is to justify my moving without orders to Captain Munson? I have it in black and white to run the Ariel into this feather bed sort of a place, and I must have it by signal or word of mouth from my betters before my cutwater curls another wave. The road may be as hard to find going out as it was coming in, and then as I had daylight as well as your written directions to steer by." "Would you lie there to perish on such a night?" said the pilot, sternly. 2 hours hence this heavy swell will break where your vessel now rides so quietly." Phone charge. 21st century. There we think exactly alike. But if I get drowned now, I am drowned according to orders. Whereas, if I knock a plank out of the schooner's bottom by following your orders, 'twill be a hole to let in mutiny as well as sea water. How do I know but the old man wants another pilot or two?" "That's philosophy," muttered the coxswain of the whaleboat in a voice that was audible, "but it is hard strain on a man's conscience to hold on in such an anchorage." "Then keep your anchor down and follow it to the bottom," said the pilot to himself. "It's worse to control with a fool than a gale of wind. But if—" No, sir, no fool neither," interrupted Griffith. "Barnstable does not deserve that epithet, though he certainly carries the point of duty to the extreme. Heave up at once, Mr. Barnstable, and get out of this bay as fast as possible. Aye, you don't give the order with half the pleasure with which I shall execute it. Pull away, boys. The Ariel shall never lay her bones in such a hard bed if I can help it." As the commander of the schooner uttered these words with a cheering voice, his men spontaneously shouted, and the whaleboat darted away from her companion, and was soon lost in the gloomy shadows cast from the cliffs. In the meantime, the oarsmen of the barge were not idle, but by strenuous efforts they forced the heavy boat rapidly through the water, and in a few minutes she ran alongside the frigate. During this period, the pilot, in a voice which had lost all the startling fierceness and authority it had manifested in his short dialogue with Barnstable, requested Griffith to repeat to him slowly the names of the officers that belonged to his ship. When the young lieutenant had complied with his request, he observed to his companion, "All good men and true, Mr. Pilot, and though this business in which you are just now engaged may be hazardous to an Englishman, there are none with us who will betray you. We need your services, and as we expect good faith from you, so shall we offer it to you in exchange." Oh, those are good. "And how know you that I need its exercise?" asked the pilot, in a manner that denoted a cold indifference to the subject. "Why, though you talk a pretty good English for a native," returned Griffith, "yet you have a small butter in your mouth that would prick the tongue of a man who was born on the other side of the Atlantic." "It is of but little moment where a man is born, or how we speak," returned the pilot coldly, "so that he does his duty bravely and in good faith. It is with perhaps fortunate for the harmony of this dialogue that the gloom, which had now increased to positive darkness, completely concealed the look of scornful irony that crossed the handsome features of the young sailor as he replied, "True, true, so that he does his duty, as you say, in good faith, but as Barnstable observed, you must know your road well to travel among these shoals on such a night as this. Know you what water we draw? 'Tis a frigate's draught, and I shall endeavor to keep you in 4 fathoms, less than that would be dangerous." "She's a sweet boat," said Griffith, "and minds her helm as a marine watches the eye of his sergeant at drill, and you must give her room and stays, for she reaches as if she would put out the wind's eye." I know, I don't got it. The pilot attended with a practiced ear to this description of the qualities of the ship, and he was about to attempt extricating from an extremely dangerous situation. Not a syllable was lost on him, and when Griffith had ended, he remarked with a singular coldness that pervaded his manner, "That is both a good and a bad quality in a narrow channel. I fear it will be the latter tonight, when we shall require to have the ship in leading strings." "I suppose we shall feel our way with the lead," said Griffith. We shall need both our eyes and leads," returned the pilot, recurring insensibly to his soliloquizing tone of voice. "I have been both in and out in darker nights than this, though never with a heavier draught than I have to." "Then, by heaven, you are not fit to handle that ship among these rocks and breakers," exclaimed Griffith. "Your men of light draught never know their water. 'Tis this deep keel only that finds the channel. Pilot, pilot, beware how you trifle with us ignorantly, for 'tis a dangerous experiment to play at hazards with an enemy." "Young man, you know not what you threaten, nor whom," said the pilot sternly, though his quiet manner still remained undisturbed. "You forget that you have a superior here, and that I have none." That shall be as you discharge your duty," cried Griffith. "For if—" "Peace!" interrupted the pilot. "We approach the ship. Let us enter in harmony." He threw himself back on the cushions when he had said this, and Griffith, though filled with the apprehensions of suffering, either by great ignorance or treachery on the part of his companion, smothered his feelings so that as to be silent, and they ascended the side of the vessel in apparent cordiality. The frigate was already riding on lengthened seas that rolled in from the ocean at each successive moment with increasing violence. Though her topsails still hung supinely from her yards, the air which continued to breathe occasionally from the land, being unable to shake the heavy canvas of which they were composed. The only sounds that were audible when Griffith and the pilot had ascended to the gangway of the frigate were produced by the sullen dashing of the sea against the massive bows of the ship and the shrill whistle of the boatswain's mate as he recalled the side boys, who were placed on either side of the gangway to do honor to the entrance of the first lieutenant and his companion. But though such a profound silence reigned among the hundreds who inhabited the huge fabric, the light produced by a dozen battle lanterns that were arranged in different parts of the decks served not only to exhibit faintly the persons of the crew, but the mingled feelings of the curiosity and care that dwelt on most of their countenances. Large groups of men were collected in the gangways, around the mainmast, and on the booms of the vessel, whose faces were distinctly visible, while numerous figures lying along the lower yards or bending out the tops might be dimly traced in the background, all of whom expressed by their attitudes the interest they took in the arrival of the boat. Though such crowds were collected in other parts of the vessel, the quarterdeck was occupied only by the officers, who were disposed according to their several ranks, and who were equally silent and attentive as the remainder of the crew. In front stood a small collection of young men, who by their similarity of dress were the equals of the companions of Griffith, though his juniors in rank. On the opposite side of the vessel was a larger assemblage of youths, who claimed Mr. Merry as their fellow. Around the captain 3 or 4 figures were standing, one of whom wore a coat of blue, with the scarlet facings of a soldier, and another the black vestments of the ship's chaplain. Behind these, and near the passage to the cabin from which he had just ascended, stood the tall, erect form of the commander of the vessel. After the brief salutation from Griffith and the junior officers, the former advanced, followed slowly by the pilot, to the place where he was expected by his veteran commander. The young man removed his hat entirely, and as he bowed with a little more than his usual ceremony, and said, "We have succeeded, sir, though not without more difficulty and delay than we anticipated." "But you have not brought off the pilot," said the captain, "and without him all our risk and trouble have been in vain." He is here," said Griffith, stepping aside and extending his arm towards the man that stood behind him, wrapped to the chin in his coarse pea jacket, and his face shadowed by the falling rims of a large hat that had seen much and hard service. "This?" exclaimed the captain. "Then there is a sad mistake. This is not the man I would have seen, nor can another supply his place." "I know not whom you expected, Captain Munson," said the stranger in a low, quiet voice, "but if you have not forgotten the day when a very different flag from the emblem of tyranny that now hangs over yon taffrail was first spread to the wind, you may remember the hand that raised it." "Bring here the light!" exclaimed the commander hastily. When the lantern was extended towards the pilot, and the glare fell strong on his features, Captain Munson started as he beheld the calm blue eyes that met his gaze, and the composed but pallid countenance of the other. Involuntarily raising his hat and baring his silver lock, the veteran cried, "It is he, though so changed!" "That his enemies did not know him," interrupted the pilot quickly. Then, touching the other by the arm as he led him aside, he continued in a lower tone, "Neither must his friends until the proper hour shall arrive." Griffith had fallen back to answer the eager questions of his messmates, and no part of this short dialogue was overheard by the officers, though it was soon perceived that their commander had discovered his error and was satisfied that the proper man had been brought on board his vessel. For many minutes the two continued to pace a part of the quarterdeck by themselves, engaged in deep and earnest discourse. As Griffith had but little to communicate, the curiosity of his listeners was soon appeased, and all eyes were directed towards that mysterious guide, who was to conduct them from a situation already surrounded by perils, which each moment not only magnified in appearance, but increased in reality. Yeah, my voice went. Fuck off.